Chapter 14. The Half House. The Hollister family stared at the empty hole in the sand for a few seconds. Then Uncle Russ said, "Ricky, was this one of your jokes?" "No, honest, an anchor really was here. I was going to bring it home, but I couldn't get it out." "Look," said Pete, "there's sort of an outline of a small anchor." "Yes, there is," his father agreed. "The anchor probably came from one of the small boats on the Mystery. I'm sorry about your disappointment, Ricky. We'll try to track down your anchor." I was going to give it to the museum because I dug it up," Ricky said, holding back the tears. "But maybe Mike ought to get the credit. He really found it." "Mike?" Mr. Hollister repeated. "Who's he?" "A dog, and I think he belongs to Homer." After Ricky told the others about the episode on the beach, he added, "Say, do you suppose Mike brought the Ruffleys back here and they took the anchor?" His father agreed it sounded very plausible. If Ricky would like to find out, his father would take him to see Homer. "Only we don't know where he lives," Ricky said. This was true. Nevertheless, Mr. Hollister thought they could learn this easily enough. First, they would go to the barge. There might be a watchman there who could tell them. As the other Hollisters started for home, Ricky and his dad went toward the river. Reaching the mouth of it, they found the dock empty. Not only was there no watchman, but Mr. Ruffley's barge and all the equipment were gone. After the Hollisters had recovered from their astonishment, Mr. Hollister said, "Well, son, it looks as if this is our evening for having things disappear." "Yes," said Ricky. "Now what are we going to do?" "Well, you decide," his father answered. "We can go home, or we can play detective. Which do you want to do?" Ricky grinned. "Let's find Homer." Mr. Hollister led the way to town and went straight to the mayor's house. He introduced himself and his son, then had Ricky tell his story to the official. "This is very unusual," said Mayor Harper. "I haven't given the treasure hunters permission to move to another spot. The Ruffleys are staying at the Seaview Hotel. We'll go there and talk to them." But when the visitors arrived at the hotel, they were told that the Ruffleys, their diver, and the two other men in the party had checked out. "Do you know where they went?" Mayor Harper asked the clerk. "They didn't say. Sorry, I can't be of any help." Mr. Hollister turned to his son. "I guess you're not sorry to see Homer move out, are you, Ricky?" he asked. "No, only he took the anchor." As there seemed to be nothing more they could do, the Hollisters thanked the mayor and said good night. After they reached home and told the family what they had learned, Pete said he was sure Mr. Ruffley had not given up the treasure hunt. "What do you mean?" Mr. Hollister asked. "Maybe he let the other men go and the barge," Pete answered. "But I'm sure Mr. Ruffley and Homer are around here yet." "Perhaps they'll watch us in the daytime," Pam spoke up, "and then if we find a clue, they'll come at night and dig there." The speculation might have gone on for some time, but the doorbell rang and interrupted it. A messenger had come with 2 telegrams, one for Mr. Hollister and the other for Uncle Russ. "Where's yours from?" Sue asked eagerly when her father finished reading his. "From Tinker." "Is he sick or something?" the little girl asked, worried. "No, it's good news. Only I guess it'll take me home." Mr. Hollister went on to say that a customer had come into the trading post to buy a big order of toys. He was a wealthy man who planned to entertain 300 children at an outing. 300, Holly exclaimed. "That's certainly a large order," her father said. "Of course, there aren't that many toys in stock at the store. I'll have to return at once to buy more so I can fill the order. Besides the profit I'll make, I'd like to see those children enjoy themselves." "That's a super order," Pete remarked. Then he asked, "Will we all have to go home?" "Well," his father was just beginning to say, when Uncle Russ interrupted him. "The children mustn't go now," he said. "My telegram is from Aunt Marge. She's bringing Teddy and Jean here tomorrow." "Oh, Dad, please let us stay," Pam begged. "It'll be so much more fun to play with our cousins again." Uncle Russ said his family was arriving by plane the next morning at nearby Wellsport. I suppose, said Mr. Hollister, that I could fly home by plane and leave you the car, Elaine. Let's make plans to do that. A call was made to the airport, and Mr. Hollister was told that he could get a plane for Shoreham at 10:15 in the morning. My folks come in at 10, said Uncle Russ, so we can make it in one trip. The Hollister children rose early, eager for the ride to Wellsport. Their father packed his suitcase, and, together with Uncle Russ, they all set off in the station wagon directly after breakfast. Sometime let's go on a long plane ride, Ricky remarked, as he watched a pilot take off in a small private plane. I'll keep that in mind, his father promised, smiling. And I suppose you'll want to run the plane, he teased. They drove up to the airfield's offices a few minutes before Aunt Marge's plane was due. The children watched as their dad got his ticket and had his baggage weighed. Then they heard a droning overhead and rushed outside to watch a large silvery plane circle the field and finally land. As the door was opened, Holly cried, "They're here!" Uncle Russ hurried forward to greet his wife and children. Then the Hollisters raced up to their cousins. What a happy reunion, with hugs and kisses and excited chatter. "You must help us find a treasure," Pete said, putting an arm around Teddy's shoulders. "And I have an adorable box kite," Pam told Jean. "I've entered in the contest." Aunt Marge, slender and pretty, with lovely dark eyes and a happy smile, said she could hardly wait to see Seagull Beach. "And will you make some of your extra special fudge for all of us?" Ricky asked. "I surely will," she promised. "Oh, goody," Sue piped up. "But we have to put Daddy on his plane first." Everybody laughed, and Mr. Hollister said he was sorry to miss the candy. His plane came a few minutes later. He kissed his family goodbye and climbed the steps to the cabin. Presently it sped down the runway and soared into the air. The children waved until the plane was out of sight. Then they hurried back to the station wagon for the ride back to Seagull Beach. Uncle Russ took a back road to avoid traffic, and they all became very interested in the countryside through which he drove. From the condition of the land and the tumble-down houses, it was apparent that no one had lived in some of the places for a long time. "I've heard fishermen used to stay here when there was a good inlet," Uncle Russ said. "It's all filled in with sand now." As he turned into a road that was not far from the shorefront, Pam called out, "See that little house over there? Is that what you call a half-house?" "I think it is," Uncle Russ replied, "and I'd like to stop and make a sketch of it." He drove into the weedy, hardly visible lane and parked. Pulling a pad and pencil from a pocket of his sport coat, he began to draw. Meanwhile, the children had jumped out of the station wagon. Pam told her cousins about Grandma Alden and her story of that the one survivor of the mystery had been found by a couple who lived in a half-house. "It could even be this one," she said excitedly. "Let's look around." "Don't forget it was 100 years ago that the wreck happened," Pete reminded his sister. "What could you find here now?" Just then they saw a man coming across a field. When he reached them, the farmer said he had seen the Hollister car stop and wondered if he could give them any information. This was part of his property. "My uncle wanted to draw a picture of the half-house," Pam answered politely. "Can you tell us why it's called that?" The question pleased the farmer very much. Sitting down on an old tree stump, he explained that in colonial days, newly married couples who had little money built only a small house for themselves. It usually was big enough for a few years, he said, smiling at the children. Then, as their family grew, they would add a room here and a room there until they had a big house. "Then I guess the people who built this place never had a family," Pam remarked. "That's right," the farmer agreed. "The old couple lived all their lives without any children, and their little home remained a half-house. Nobody's lived in it since, I understand." "Is it all right to look around?" Pam asked. She was tempted to tell the man why, but decided not to. The farmer said they might investigate, but he warned them that the place was very rickety. The children should be careful not to get hurt. When Mrs. Hollister heard this, she went with them. The man opened a creaking front door, and they went inside. How musty the old place was, and the rooms were so tiny the visitors filled them up. It did not take long to examine the living room and kitchen on the first floor, and the one bedroom on the second. Then Pete and Ricky led the way into the most mysterious part of the house, a little round cellar at the foot of a flight of very steep steps. "Ooh, it's spooky down here," Ricky said, "and dark, too." "Let's get a flashlight from the car," Pete suggested. Holly ran for it and gave it to Pete. Then, while Mrs. Hollister and the girls waited, the three boys went all the way down. The cellar walls were lined with brick, but the floor was just plain earth. "Hold the light on the steps," Pam called. "Jean and I are coming down." Teddy held the light, while Ricky and Pete started to poke around. Suddenly the flashlight shone on a piece of oblong marble embedded in the dirt. "Wonder what this is," Ricky said. Pete picked up a sharp stick and pried around the slab. Then he and Teddy lifted it up for everyone to see. "Roaring rockets!" Pete exclaimed. "It's an old tombstone." On the reverse side was an inscription, but the children could not read it because the stone was covered with dirt. "Let's take it outside and look at it," Pam suggested. The slab was not very heavy, and Pete and Teddy easily carried it to the yard. When the farmer saw it, he chuckled. "I saw that thing down there years ago," he said, "but I never dreamed it was an old tombstone. Let's see what it says." Pam already was busy scraping the dirt off the inscription with a stick. "Read what it says," Holly begged her. Pam looked at it for a moment, puzzled. "It's not like regular tombstones," she told them all. "It says, 'A mystery man, though a pirate he be, loved his ship in the stormy sea. All was lost on the bounding main, where the Frog Rock looks across to Spain.'"